there comes a moment when all endurance reaches its limit, a moment when the one who stayed silent, who endured, who sacrificed everything for love, finally rises, and the narcissist, who believed they would always hold the upper hand, suddenly realizes the game is over, not with screaming, not with loud acts of revenge, but with a terrifying calm. When a super empath, once manipulated, suffocated, and made to doubt their own worth, awakens, they don't return as the broken soul who once begged for love. They return like fire, silent but powerful enough to burn down the entire illusion the narcissist built. If you're watching this video, chances are you've walked through that darkness too. You loved with your whole heart, only to be met with coldness, lies, and the gnawing feeling that you'd never be enough. Maybe you believed that if you gave enough, waited long enough, forgave enough, they would change. But then you realized you cannot heal someone who thrives on hurting others. This is not a story about revenge. This is the journey of a soul, from being manipulated to finally seeing the truth. This is the journey of the super empath, who broke free from the trance, let go of the illusion, and now rises as their true self, strong, awake, and unafraid. In this video, I'm going to share with you how a super empath strikes back, not to hurt, but to reclaim control over their own life. I'll show you what really happens when the one the narcissist tried to break stops playing by their rules. And if you're ready, then sit back, take a deep breath, because the journey ahead won't just wake you up, it will change the way you see yourself. Before a super empath can strike back, they must first see the battlefield clearly. And the truth is, this is not just a relationship. This is a psychological game. Intricate, calculated, built on manipulation, illusion, and a relentless hunger for control. A narcissist does not love you the way you understand love. They're not seeking connection, they're seeking control. Every compliment, every hug, every time they say, "I need you," doesn't come from the heart. It comes from a need to keep you within their orbit. They don't need you, they need the feeling of being needed. And you, with your sensitivity, sincerity, and compassion, are the perfect supply, because you believe, you want to save, you're willing to forgive. And that's exactly where the game begins. The narcissist manipulates on multiple emotional levels. They'll awaken your compassion, only to make you feel guilty for being hurt. They use gaslighting, causing you to doubt your memories, your emotions, even your sanity. They shift personas constantly. Today, the perfect lover. Tomorrow, the helpless victim. The next day, the one putting up with you. All of it is a performance to trap you in a cycle with no escape. Worse still, they plant a distorted belief in you that you need them to feel accepted. That if you're just good enough, kind enough, sacrificial enough, they'll love you the way they did in the beginning. But that's a promise that will never be kept. It's an illusion, and the more you chase it, the further you drift from your true self. Then one day, you start to wake up. You realize you weren't weak. You were conditioned to doubt your own intuition. You weren't unlovable. You were taught to question what love really is. And once you begin to see the truth, the game starts to lose its power. When you stop reacting the way you used to, the narcissist begins to panic, because the one thing they can't manipulate is someone who sees them for exactly who they are. And it's from that very moment the counterattack begins, not with rage, not with revenge, but with awakening. And in the next section, you'll discover exactly what happens when a super empath fully wakes up and the narcissist realizes their time is up. No awakening ever happens in peace. Before a super empath can strike back, they must pass through a storm, a phase of chaos where everything they once believed in begins to crumble. But it's in those ruins that a stronger version of themselves is born. At first, it's just a feeling, something nameless, a vague sense that something is off, that you're in love, but you feel alone, that you're giving, but always being told it's not enough. You begin to feel drained, but you don't understand why. And worse, you blame yourself for that exhaustion. Then one day the pieces start to fall into place. A lie is exposed. A moment of cold indifference becomes undeniable. A manipulation that no longer works. And you, with the sharp intuition of an empath, begin to see the mask slipping. It's no longer the person you thought you loved. It's a manufactured system, built on control and illusion. The truth at first doesn't set you free. It hurts. It hurts so deeply you can barely breathe, because now you have to face that everything you once believed may have just been a performance. And the betrayal isn't just theirs. It's the betrayal of your own heart. But from that pain, you begin to rise. You stop making excuses for them. You stop finding reasons to stay. You stop waiting for them to change. And for the first time in a long time, you hear the real voice inside of you again. You begin to realize you weren't born to heal those who destroy you. You are not responsible for carrying the weight of someone else's emotions. You don't have to make love beautiful when it was corrupted at its core. That is the moment the super empath awakens. And this awakening doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. You start saying no to manipulation. You draw boundaries. You stop explaining yourself just to be accepted. And most importantly, you let go of the need to be understood by someone who never wanted to understand you. A super empath isn't stronger than others. They've just walked through the fire and refused to let it burn their soul. They didn't become hardened for revenge. They became resilient to protect truth and inner peace. From this point on, they're no longer the victim, they're the protagonist. They no longer live in reaction to the narcissist, they live in alignment with their true self. And when that happens, the game ends. Not with a fight, but with silence. With a look that sees through the facade. With a laugh that no longer holds pain. With a heart that no longer needs to prove its worth. That is the moment a super empath strikes back, not with rage, but with clarity. And in the next section you'll witness, step by step, move by move, how the super empath turns the entire game upside down, how they reclaim the power they once lost, and force the narcissist to face their greatest fear, the truth. 1. Complete silence, cutting off the emotional supply. Silence is not weakness, it is a supreme form of power. One that only those who have seen the narcissist's true nature possess the courage to use. And when a super empath chooses silence, it's no longer about avoidance. It becomes a declaration of war without a single word spoken. A narcissist doesn't survive on love, they survive on your reactions. Your anger is their fuel, your tears are their trophy. Your attempts to explain yourself are proof that they still have control over your mind. Every time you react, whether through rage, pleading, or heartbreak, you're feeding their distorted ego. They don't need your agreement. They don't need your affection. All they need is your continued reaction. That's why a super empath's silence terrifies them. For the first time, they lose access to the emotional control panel they've operated for so long. They throw an insult and are met with nothing. They send a provocative message and it goes unanswered. They craft a tearful scene hoping to pull you back in, but you walk away in silence. To them, silence is the worst punishment of all because it leaves them with nothing. No attention, no argument, no audience to play the victim. It forces them into a confrontation they've always avoided, facing themselves. But achieving this kind of silence is no easy feat. A super empath must go through an intense inner transformation. You must overcome the desperate need to be understood. You must break free from the emotional addiction that once kept you tethered. You must let go of the illusion that if you don't speak, they won't know the depth of your pain. Trust this. They know. They've always known. They just never cared. When you choose silence, you're not avoiding the truth. You're refusing to be abused. You're saying, I'm done playing. I won't follow your script anymore. And that's when the narcissist begins to spiral. They'll try everything, smearing your name, begging, turning others against you, pretending they've changed. But you don't flinch. You don't respond. You unplug the emotional power source. From that moment on, the power they once held evaporates. Silence becomes the invisible weapon that leaves no scars, yet brings down the entire emotional empire they built on lies and manipulation. Not everyone understands this, because real silence takes immense inner strength, unshakable self-respect, and the wisdom to know, I don't need to win against someone who no longer deserves my voice. A super empath doesn't go silent because they've lost. They go silent because they've already won. So if you find yourself at that point, no longer replying, no longer explaining, no longer chasing, know that you're not being weak. You are doing the bravest thing of all, ending the game without raising your voice. Let your silence be the most powerful message you've ever sent. I've come back, but this time not to be loved, this time to be free. 2. Exposing them publicly and standing firm when the truth comes to light. The narcissist lives behind a mask, a carefully crafted image that appears polished, kind, charming, pitiful, or so flawless that no one questions it. But behind that glow is a fragile, distorted being, completely dependent on the admiration of others, just to feel like they exist. That's why the truth, especially the public truth, is their greatest enemy. A super empath doesn't expose them to humiliate. The goal isn't to wound, it's to stop covering up. When you begin to speak the truth, even with a simple question in front of others, like, why did you say that yesterday and deny it today? Or, I remember you said the opposite to my friends. You've already begun to shake the foundations of the illusion they've built. A narcissist doesn't fear being disliked. They fear being seen. Because once people see them for who they really are, they lose the only thing they ever had, the power that came from others' admiration. Picture this. You're standing among a group of friends, colleagues, or family members. The narcissist is spinning a tearful, emotionally manipulative story, but this time you don't stay silent. You don't laugh it off. You don't play along. You calmly say, I don't think that's exactly how it happened. And just like that, no yelling, no dramatic accusations, just the quiet, steady truth is enough to make them unravel. They will react, maybe with anger, maybe by slipping into the victim role. They might try to make you look unstable to others, but if you stay calm, if you stick to the truth without getting pulled into their emotional traps, you win. Because what breaks them isn't an accusation, it's the fact that you're no longer afraid. However, this tactic comes with one essential requirement. You must stay grounded. Be ready for retaliation, for denial, for the narcissist trying to paint you as the toxic one. But never forget this. They're not afraid of you being wrong. They're afraid of you being right. The truth is the one thing they cannot control. And when you, the one they once manipulated into silence, begin to speak it, their whole fabricated world starts to crack. A super empath doesn't need to scream. They only need the courage to look directly and to speak honestly, because truth doesn't need to be dressed up, it just needs to be lived. And if you're considering speaking out, remember, you are not alone. Every time a super empath rises, they don't just reclaim their own voice, they inspire others who are still suffering in silence. So, speak, expose, let the light shine where darkness used to rule, and stand firm, because no matter how hard they push back, you've done the right thing. And you never have to apologize for that. 3. Refusing to heal someone who doesn't want to be healed. One of the most deceptive traps an empath can fall into is the belief that love alone can heal another person, especially when that person is a narcissist, someone who wears the mask of pain but uses that very pain to manipulate and control. Super empaths once believed in that beautiful idea. They believed that if they were just patient enough, kind enough, loving enough, the narcissist would change, that gentleness could reach a heart of stone, that light could redeem the darkness. But one day they wake up to a hard truth. Not everyone wants to be healed. Narcissists aren't seeking healing, they seek power through the victim role. They use their tragic backstories not to recover, but to exploit your compassion. They don't want you to help them become better. They want you to feel guilty for not trying harder. With hearts that lean toward goodness, super empaths easily fall into the savior trap. They carry the emotional burden of both people. They analyze, explain, make excuses, sacrifice. And in the end, they're left exhausted, not because they're weak, but because they've been pouring water into a bottomless cup. When a super empath finally awakens, they begin to ask the liberating question, am I responsible for healing the person who keeps hurting me? And the answer, though painful, is no. Refusing to heal someone who doesn't want to change isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. You can't pull someone out of the abyss when they're clinging to darkness like a crown. You can't rescue someone who plays the role of eternal victim just to avoid accountability. This tactic doesn't mean you stop loving humanity. It simply means you stop setting yourself on fire to warm a heart that has chosen to freeze. The super empath strikes back by stepping away from the role of healer, a role that was never truly theirs to play. They no longer spend hours analyzing why someone was so cold. They no longer cry over a cutting remark and still choose to stay. They no longer justify their pain by saying, he's been through so much. Instead, they begin to say, I'm no longer trying to change you. I'm trying to save myself. And that's when everything shifts. Because the narcissist doesn't fear being hated, they fear being abandoned. They fear the moment you stop trying to fix them, because that means you no longer see them as someone worth saving, but as someone no longer worthy of your emotional investment. When you refuse to be their healer, you send a clear message to the universe. I've learned this lesson, now I choose peace. And that peace, the act of stepping away from the savior role, is what makes you untouchable. Remember, you are not required to save a soul that is choosing to self-destruct. You only need to save the part of your own soul that still longs to live. 4. Turning every drama into a joke with a smirk of disdain. Narcissists are masters of theatrics. They construct complex emotional performances like an endless play in which they cast themselves as the victim, the hero, the misunderstood soul, all in a single act. And you, the empath, are often trapped as the unwitting audience, or worse, as a supporting character in a role you never agreed to play. They hurl drama at you like a weapon. One day it's tears, the next it's explosive rage, followed by a sudden wave of tenderness and sweet promises. They fabricate conflict only to play the one who wants peace. They insult you, then say they were just hurt. Everything is a scene, and for a long time you believed it was real, until the day you finally see the script. The super empath stops reacting the way they used to. No more panic when the drama unfolds. No more over-explaining, no more carrying the emotional burden of another person. Instead, they smile. Not with bitterness, not with mockery, but with a calm, knowing smile. A smile that only someone who has seen through the illusion can truly wear. Because when you smile like that, they feel fear. Not because you're taunting them, but because that quiet smirk tells them they're no longer the center of your emotional world. You're no longer buying into their performance. You've left the stage, and you've taken your power with you. You smile because you've exited the game. You smile because you now see their chaos for what it is, a hollow performance that no longer affects your inner peace. You smile because you're free, and nothing disturbs a manipulator more than your emotional detachment. And let's be clear, drama only has power if you feed it. When you chase it down to fix or resolve it, you're validating it. But when you step back, observe with calm clarity, and simply choose not to respond, you transform their grand tragedy into a cheap comedy. They might scream, cry, post vague messages, gossip about you, or twist stories to gain sympathy. But if you hold your ground, shake your head and quietly smile, you've taken back the spotlight. The super empath understands this truth. You don't defeat a narcissist by engaging in their game. You win by refusing to play. And when you stop, not out of exhaustion but from wisdom, their theatrics lose all their power. So the next time they launch a new act, sit back, observe in silence, and think to yourself, how unfortunate, I once thought this was real. Then turn away and go on living a life where no one else pulls the strings. Because nothing causes more panic in a manipulator than the sight of someone they once broke, now smiling, whole, and completely free of their control. 5. Set boundaries like iron laws, no bargaining, no softness. When you live with a narcissist, boundaries simply don't exist. They walk into your mind like entering an unlocked home. They assume the right to define who you are, how you should feel, how you should love, and how you're supposed to respond to the pain they themselves have caused. And you, with your open heart and your longing to protect love, once allowed that to happen, not because you were weak, but because you believed that love meant sacrifice, patience, and understanding. But the more you lacked boundaries, the easier it became for them to control and manipulate you. That's why, when the super empath awakens, one of the first and most powerful counterattacks is to establish boundaries, not with empty words, but with unwavering action. No bargaining, no explaining, no bending, just firm, calm clarity. You don't need to shout, "I've changed, I won't let you hurt me anymore." That's not necessary. You only need to look them in the eyes and say once and clearly, "I don't allow that behavior in my life." And the most important part, when they try to cross the line again, you don't move, you don't negotiate, you don't give in. The narcissist won't accept your boundaries easily. To them, boundaries are humiliation, a clear signal that their power over you is slipping. So they'll test you. They'll probe gently, then push harder. They'll say things like, "You've changed, you've become so cold," or "I'm hurting and you're being heartless," or even, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't need conditions." But this time, you know better. That's not love. That's manipulation disguised as vulnerability. And this time, you're not stepping back. Because the super empath understands, a boundary is not a threat. It is a declaration of self-worth. It is a sacred line that says, "I value myself enough not to let you cross this again." You begin to say no to midnight texts. You refuse conversations that are designed to blame or belittle you. You no longer show up just because they demand one last talk. You stop sitting at tables where your soul was once shattered. And you don't apologize for walking away. And here's what's most important. You stop feeling guilty for doing what's right for your well-being. Boundaries are not acts of cruelty. They are signs of emotional maturity, and when you build them like iron, firm, final, and non-negotiable, no one, not even the one who once knew your every weakness, can get past them anymore. This is no longer a temporary wall. This is a permanent border between you and anyone who treats your kindness as weakness. The super empath doesn't need to shout or threaten. They just need to stand their ground. And when they do, the entire dynamic shifts. The narcissist, so used to control, spirals. They scream, beg, plead, try everything. But you remain unmoved. You don't open the door. You don't respond. You don't entertain the performance. Because now, you're no longer building walls just to avoid pain. You are building a sacred boundary to protect the peace of mind and soul you fought like hell to reclaim. 6. No more explaining, because I don't need your approval. One of the quietest yet most powerful turning points in a super empath's journey is the moment they stop explaining. In the past, you tried to lay everything out clearly, because you believed that if they could just understand you, they would change. You thought sincerity could melt through the cold indifference. You believed that if you were kind enough, clear enough, gentle enough, love could still be saved. But that belief came from a heart that hadn't yet realized it was speaking to someone who never intended to listen. Narcissists don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. They extract your words, twist them, and use them as weapons. The more you speak, the more you lose your footing. Every honest explanation becomes fuel for a new psychological trap, one that leaves you defending yourself, apologizing, and questioning your own reality. But then comes the awakening. The super empath sees the truth. I I don't need agreement in order to stand in my worth. You don't need to explain why you need space. You don't have to justify your silence. You don't owe anyone a defense for walking away. You're not being cold. You've simply realized not everyone is worthy of hearing your truth. Refusing to explain is not disconnection. It's a declaration. I'm no longer handing my heart over for interrogation. You owe the narcissist nothing, especially not words they've weaponized against you. Now, all you need is one simple sentence. I don't feel the need to explain this. Then you walk away. No turning back, no second guessing. From that moment on, the narcissist begins to unravel. They no longer have a tool to control you, no more words to distort, no emotional reaction to feed off of. They lose their stage, and you, once the supporting character in their life, step back into your rightful place under your own spotlight. Explaining is something we do when goodwill exists, but to a narcissist, it's merely an opening to manipulate the truth. The super empath strikes back not with arguments, but with intentional silence, because when you no longer need them to understand you before you allow yourself to be who you are, that's when you're truly free. 7. Calm, emotionless communication and why it terrifies them. Narcissists don't just want you to speak, they want you to react. They thrive in the emotional gray zone, where you're constantly defending, explaining, compromising, or trying to keep the peace. And when you're pulled into that emotional whirlwind, they win. But then one day, you change. You don't go silent, but you also don't explode. You communicate, clearly, calmly, without emotion, no blaming, no begging for understanding. And in that moment, you shut down their control system completely. Imagine they throw out one of their typical, passive-aggressive jabs. Oh, right, you're always the victim, aren't you? In the past, you might have panicked, cried, tried to prove them wrong. But now, you simply respond. I don't feel the need to explain myself. Or even better, this is my boundary, I'm ending the conversation here. No yelling, no sarcasm, no outburst, just a cold steadiness that leaves them unsure where to strike next. Because to the narcissist, your emotions are the control panel, and now you've pulled the plug. Calm communication throws them off. They don't know what you're thinking, they can't tell which tactic will work. They try guilt-tripping, begging, playing the victim, but you stay unmoved. That calm isn't apathy. It's the result of a mind that's walked through hell and made the decision never to return. When you speak without trembling, when you make a decision without asking for permission, when you say, I don't agree without offering a single extra word, you are reclaiming leadership in your own life. And believe me, a narcissist can handle being hated. What they can't handle is someone who no longer fears losing them. Calm communication is a high-level form of power. It only emerges when you've fully stepped out of the victim mindset. It's a declaration. I'm not here to be accepted. I'm here to be authentic. And when you live from that place, the narcissist who once dominated every conversation has nothing left but silence and confusion. 8. Total withdrawal and never looking back. There are endings that don't need to be announced. Goodbyes that don't require a speech, and there are departures where silence speaks louder than any words ever could. The super empath doesn't retaliate by causing pain, they strike back by disappearing completely. No more entanglements, no more messages, no more clinging to the hope that change will come, no more fighting to revive a love that's been dead far longer than they wanted to admit, because in the end, they understand one vital truth. Healing doesn't come from rebuilding what broke you. It comes from the courage to walk away with finality. A narcissist never truly closes the door. They leave it cracked open, hoping you'll wander back through. They let you go but leave a hook, a casual message, a triggered memory, a chance encounter, a seemingly innocent question like, "How have you been?" And the moment you respond, they know they still hold a string. But this time, you don't respond. Not because you're angry, not because you're trying to punish them, but because you've come to know the value of the peace you've fought so hard to reclaim. Total withdrawal isn't just blocking a number or deleting a profile. It's a severance that runs deeper, through your thoughts, your energy, and your perception. It's when you say to yourself, I'm no longer waiting for an apology. I don't need closure. I don't need anyone to validate what I went through. I just need to move forward and leave their presence behind, even in my mind. And when you truly withdraw, something remarkable happens. Every ounce of power they once had over you vanishes, because that power was never really theirs. It only existed through your permission. The super empath doesn't look back. They don't check their social media. They don't revisit old messages. They don't scroll through stories or wonder if maybe this time they should have that one last conversation. They close the door and they walk toward the light, because they understand now, not every wound needs acknowledgement to heal. Some wounds just need you to stop reopening them. Walking away isn't the end of a relationship, it's the end of self-destruction disguised as love. And when you no longer turn around, that's the moment the narcissist finally understands. You didn't leave because you hated them, you left because, at last, you decided to love yourself. 9. Redefining yourself. Escaping the narcissist's lens. One of the deepest wounds a narcissist leaves behind isn't found in the insults they throw. It's in the way they distort the way you see yourself. They don't break you with physical violence. They do something far more cruel. They bend your self-belief little by little through subtle remarks, dismissive glances, and calculated indifference. You're too sensitive. I didn't do anything. You're just overreacting. No one else would ever put up with someone like you. Over time, repeated again and again, they reprogram how you perceive yourself, and eventually you begin to doubt. Am I really too emotional? Do I truly need this person to feel whole? Will I ever be loved if I don't try harder? When the super empath awakens, they don't just leave the relationship, they rescue themselves from a belief system that has been manipulated and poisoned. They begin asking a different kind of question, not about the narcissist, but about themselves. Who am I when I'm no longer being distorted through the narcissist gaze? And that question becomes a profound turning point, because super empaths don't just survive, they are reborn. Redefining yourself means peeling off the layers of identity that were forced onto you. You're no longer too sensitive, you are deeply intuitive. You're no longer weak, you are someone who chose love even when it hurt. You're no longer someone who needs them to feel worthy. You are whole, all on your own. This is the moment you begin rewriting your story, not using their words, but rooted in your inner truth. You rediscover your passions, you return to the things that make you feel alive. You love yourself, not because someone else finally sees your worth, but because you realize you've always been worthy, even if no one ever told you so. And you do all of this not to prove the narcissist wrong, you do it to prove to yourself that they never had the authority to define you in the first place. From that moment on, you no longer reflect their gaze. You become a mirror for your own light. And when the narcissist sees you like that, grounded, whole, no longer needing them to feel enough, that's when they realize they've lost you forever. Not because you disappeared, but because you became someone they can no longer reach. 10. Turning healing into the ultimate revenge through freedom. There's a bitter paradox that narcissists can never face. The greatest punishment doesn't come from hatred. It comes from the simple fact that you're living well without needing them. Narcissists hope you'll fall apart. They hope you'll spiral into despair. They hope you'll crawl back, apologize, plead, prove that you're still affected, because only in your suffering do they feel significant. But when the super empath truly heals, they don't need to prove anything. They don't need to be more successful or happier just to retaliate. They simply live in alignment with their truth, and that alone becomes the most powerful answer. Healing isn't about turning your back in anger. It's about returning to yourself in peace, when you can think of them without emotional chaos. When you talk about the past and no pain stirs in your heart, when you walk past the places that once haunted you and feel nothing but quiet gratitude that you made it out. The super empath doesn't pursue healing to impress anyone. They pursue it because they deserve a life untouched by manipulation. They learn to love themselves again. They reignite passions that were once extinguished. They form healthy relationships with people who don't demand they shrink themselves to be loved. And when they do all this, the narcissist feels the sting. Not from any direct act, but from what's gone. No one left to control, no one left to drain, no one left to mirror them, because the empath's light no longer shines in their direction. That's when the narcissist looks back and realizes, I once had someone extraordinary and I destroyed it. But the part that cuts deepest isn't losing you, it's knowing that you don't even mention them when talking about your life today. The super empath doesn't seek revenge with sharp words or cold stares. They make peace their shield. They turn silence into strength. They transform their new life, independent, empowered, radiant, into a mirror that reflects. Everything you tried to destroy in me never died. It was just waiting to be set free. And from that moment on, the super empath doesn't just survive, they win. There's a truth that everyone who has been in a relationship with a narcissist eventually comes to understand. The deepest wounds don't come from loud insults, but from the quiet manipulation that once made you question your worth and your intuition. It wasn't just emotional exhaustion you endured. You were robbed of the right to define yourself. And then one day you stop waiting for an apology, you stop hoping for change, you no longer seek answers just to find closure. You don't retreat in pain, you walk away in clarity. There's no need for drama, no need for rage, only a calm, grounded silence. And in that silence lies more strength than any explosion of emotion ever could. The 10 counterattacks you've just walked through aren't merely strategies to protect yourself. They are steps to rebuild a value system that was once distorted by manipulation. One by one, you're not just reclaiming control over your emotions, you're reclaiming the right to fully exist in your own life, whole, free, and no longer imprisoned by anyone else's judgment. Because there is one truth a narcissist can never bear. You no longer orbit around them. You don't react. You don't explain. You no longer use your pain as currency for attention. And from that moment on, every ounce of power they once had vanishes. Your victory isn't in revenge or in making them suffer. Your real triumph is found in walking forward peacefully without needing others to understand the full story, and without needing your abuser to admit they were wrong. It's in being able to look at yourself in the mirror and smile, not with bitterness, not with guilt, and not with regret, but with pride for having chosen to walk away. A super empath doesn't live to prove they were right. They live to affirm this one truth. No one, not even someone who once believed they could control your soul, gets to decide who you become. And when you rise, with a heart still soft but a spirit forged in steel, needing no validation and seeking no permission, that is the moment you become truly unshakable. In the end, what punishes the narcissist isn't your hatred. It's the way you live, self-led, self-respecting, and radiant, while they remain trapped in the darkness of their own design. And whether you're just beginning this journey, somewhere in the middle, or already standing in the light on the other side, know this. You didn't just survive the war, you won't, without ever needing to harm a soul.